So this video is going to be an interesting one. We don't know if this is really a big deal. It kind of depends on just how you view it. If you want to see this as a bad thing, then okay, you're very free to do so. But today, we are talking about Detroit Red Wings prospect Dmitry Buchelnikov. And I will be the first to say, this isn't a guy we talk about much. We've only made really one video about him in the past, and that was the 1 year later. We also talked about his draft initially when he was taken by the Detroit Red Wings, but there has been some news about this prospect that may or may not be alarming. It really just depends on how you view it. Buchelnikov is a 20-year-old, 5'10", 170-pound right-handed left winger who is a Red Wings guy drafted by the Wings in the 2022 draft. He was taken 52nd overall, second round, and if you take a look at where he was projected to go, the fact is he didn't really have any projections in the 2022 draft. He was ranked 125th in 2021 by future considerations, so he was an overage prospect technically. 2003 the birth date, which means he would have been eligible for that 2021 draft, but he was undrafted. In 2022, though, he bolstered up a 75-point season in 56 games played with SKA 1946 St. Petersburg. This caught the attention of the Red Wings scouts. They drafted him. He's a speedy winger with the ability to bounce off his line mates, a flashy, offense-first kind of player. And after we had seen him get drafted, he posted up a year that was fairly good. He was under a point per game in the VHL, which is the second-tier Russian league, just underneath the KHL. He was also a 3-point-per-game guy with SKA 1946 St. Petersburg, so a very, very strong player in the Russian junior scene. And that success carried over into this season's worth of play, where he played 10 games in the VHL, had 12 points, so was over a point per game there, and he was loaned out to the KHL's Admiral Vladivostok team, wherein he was at 29 points in 59 games. That was a really good point production number for a guy who was only 20 years old. This guy legitimately could be seen as a valuable NHL caliber prospect who could find himself some time in the NHL sometime soon if he keeps on progressing down this development path. He can score, he can create plays. He had a 40-goal season back when he was drafted, which is why the Wings even took him. Buchelnikov is a really underrated guy, and somebody who, because he plays in Russia, doesn't really get the same coverage as many of the Red Wings prospects that you see in Grand Rapids or in Detroit. But that's just the thing. The news that we have with Buchelnikov spells out that we're not going to see him in Grand Rapids anytime soon. Because according to Hockey News Hub, which is an account going out there that usually talks about Russian news, I'm hearing that Red Wings prospect Dmitry Buchelnikov has signed a new 2-year, 2-way contract with SKA St. Petersburg in the KHL. Now, I know what you're thinking, wait a minute, this guy was playing for Admiral, what are you talking about SKA St. Petersburg? Well, he's been on SKA St. Petersburg's team this entire time. He's developed in the SKA system. It's only this season he was loaned out to Admiral to play in the KHL over there, rather than being kept around in the SKA Neva St. Petersburg team in the second tier, or bouncing down to SKA 1946 St. Petersburg in the junior league. It's kind of different from the NHL. In Russia, you have yourselves the KHL team, the VHL team, and the junior team all sort of belonging into the same group. It's all kind of a different system there. They're collected under the same umbrella, so there is flexibility here, which is why Buchelnikov was able to play in all 3 different versions of the team over the past 2 years, but hearing that his contract has now been extended for the next 2 seasons spells some pretty interesting things for Red Wings fans in particular. This tweet went out there and asked, hey, wasn't he traded to Admiral? No, he went to Admiral on loan. Does this mean that he can't come to the States until 2027-2028? Rumors for a year now say that he's never coming and that he wants to stay over there in Russia, and that honestly is like one of the things that I think NHL teams do have to think about when it comes to these Russian talents, because obviously it's good to see them wanting to progress and play in the NHL, especially if they're good enough, but sometimes they just don't want to. Sometimes they want to stick around. And this was exemplified even further with this Twitter thread here. The Grindline guys went out there and said, if it's true that he has signed a 2-year, 2-way contract with SKA, it seems that Buchelnikov may not be interested in coming to the NHL or AHL anytime soon. There is the possibility here of being a lost prospect. Sean Shapiro went out there and replied to this. By the way, Shapiro has done some pretty good work over the years. He's also in that movie, The Late Game. It's in his profile picture. I had a really big blast watching that film. His NHL rights are still held indefinitely by Detroit as long as there is no formal NHL-KHL transfer agreement. So it's not even anytime soon. It's if he ever wants to come to the NHL, it would have to be through the Red Wings. Yeah, but if I was Detroit, and especially with Steve Yzerman's recent comments about guys playing in the AHL, is to want him to get up in a big-minute role in Grand Rapids for at least part of a season once his current deal is up. I would say this is how I expect him to handle the situation. The AHL comment isn't one-size-fits-all. If that were the case, they wouldn't be leaving ASP in Sweden next year. And then there's still kind of an expectation from the Grindline folks to get ASP in the AHL at some point next season. So, long story short, there is a lot of nuance here. And it's difficult to put the same label on every individual prospect because obviously everybody's different and everybody will go through their own different paths of evaluation. They'll have their own assessments of themselves. They'll have their own specific values and what they want to happen to their careers. If Buchelnikov does not want to play in the AHL, he only wants to be NHL or KHL, then he might have it in his best interest to stay in Russia, develop over there, and then only make the jump to Motown by the time he feels he is a guaranteed player on that team. Potentially not with the Griffins, but with the regular Red Wings. Now, is that unorthodox? Maybe in this day and age, yeah, you could definitely say so. But at the same time, I mean, Steve Yzerman was a part of the Red Wings when they got Fedorov, when they got Larionov and Krutov and Konstantinov all those years ago, and when those guys were defecting and there was an entire weird thing going on. Obviously, you know, it's not as dramatic nowadays. You don't need to defect from Russia anymore to play in the NHL, but Steve Yzerman has taken that risk, you know, taken the draft pick, taken the guy, acknowledging that there might be a future where this guy doesn't even want to come over. So there certainly is some intrigue here, I'd say, when it comes to this prospect, because Buchelnikov definitely was good enough to justify thinking about as a potential Red Wing of the future. I think if everything pans out, you're probably looking at somewhat of a 30, 35-point guy at his peak in the NHL, if everything works. Of course, if Buchelnikov just becomes better in the KHL, he becomes like a point-per-game guy next year with SKA or whatever team he gets loaned out to, then maybe that ceiling of his could rise up a little bit. But for now, this is what we have. The Red Wings have a prospect that might be sticking around in Russia for 2 more years, and as a result, we might not see him in North America until he's 23, 24 years old. Before we end off this video, though, I wanted to go over to this article because it was resurfacing after all this Buchelnikov news. This is back from November 2023, so a little bit earlier into the season, and it goes over just how Dmitry Buchelnikov transitioned into the KHL. It's a really, really good piece over here, very in-depth interview that I translated from Russian into English, and I mean, look, we'll just go over the first thing here that he goes out there and says, "Before my debut in the KHL, I was very worried. My first shift was very exciting, but by the 3rd or 4th shift, I entered the game more calmly and measuredly. The guys encouraged me. By the way, my opponents almost scored because of me, but my partner saved me." He smiles. "And I had a couple of good moments, too. The most important thing is that the debut took place with a victory, and to be honest, I didn't think anything about it before the game. I just wanted to show my game, what I can do. It seems to me that I played the first match in the league well, and it gave me a little confidence. I found out that I would be in the squad the day before the game, and shared the news with my parents. I said, 'Tomorrow is the debut, come to the game.' My dad reacted calmly, maybe he didn't show any emotion because he himself was a former hockey player, and my mother, of course, was delighted. Before this match, I didn't play with the older guys. I was mostly on the youth team. It was a new experience for me, especially the first match of the season in front of my own stadium. In the locker room after the game, it was cool, positive. I can say I've never seen such an atmosphere before." So this is kind of the thing, you know, it's a really long piece that's really in-depth about Buchelnikov's first few years in the KHL. This is a beautiful picture. Look at him celebrating the goal there with his mouth guard and everything. That's great. But yeah, there are a lot of things to like about this guy. But whether or not we see him in Detroit, that remains to be seen. Link is going to be in the description if you want to go ahead and read this article, by the way. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, how you respond to that if you're the Red Wings, and what are your opinions overall on Dmitry Buchelnikov. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.